At 2 in the morning, the world feels strangely quiet, as if everything is holding its breath. That was exactly how the night felt when I heard a frantic knock at my front door, loud, hurried, desperate. I jolted awake, my heart immediately racing with an unnamed fear. No one knocks at that hour unless something is wrong. I pulled on my robe and rushed down the hallway, every step echoing louder than the last. When I opened the door, I found my daughter standing there in the porch light, shivering, crying, her hair a tangled mess, her face pale and streaked with tears. The sight of her was enough to freeze the air in my lungs. She didn't say a word at first. She simply collapsed into my arms with a sob that came from somewhere deep inside her. I held her tightly, feeling her whole body tremble. I didn't ask questions. I just guided her inside, closed the door behind us, and led her to the couch. It wasn't until she had a blanket wrapped around her and a glass of water in her hands that she finally tried to speak. Even then, her voice cracked, barely more than a whisper. "He's gone, Mum." At first, I didn't understand. Gone could mean many things. Maybe he'd stormed out after a fight, maybe he needed space, maybe he'd left for a night out and didn't return. But the look in her eyes told me it was far worse than anything I could have imagined. She clutched the glass so tightly her fingers shook. "He took everything," she said. "Every cent, every savings we had, everything." I felt a slow, cold dread curl through me. I asked her to explain, though a part of me didn't want to hear it. She told me how she woke up earlier that night and found their bank accounts emptied. Every dollar gone. She had tried calling him, but his phone was off. She tried checking his usual spots, but he wasn't there. Then she noticed some of his clothes missing, and the spare suitcase was gone. She didn't want to believe what the evidence was showing her. She kept hoping he'd walk in and say it was all a misunderstanding. But her phone buzzed with a message from a friend. Her husband had been seen earlier that evening at the airport, and he wasn't alone. He was with a woman none of us had ever heard of. My daughter's voice cracked again as she said the word, "Mistress," like it physically hurt her to even form it. She'd trusted this man, she'd built a home with him, she'd planned a future with him. And just like that, he had ripped it all away, leaving her in the middle of the night with no explanation, no money, no closure. The betrayal was so sharp, I could almost feel it myself. I reached out and tucked her hair behind her ear, the same way I used to when she was little and woke up from nightmares. I wished that this was just another bad dream I could chase away for her. But this was real, cruelly real. She leaned against me and cried until her body had no more strength left, and I held her, all the while fighting the storm of emotions rising in my chest, anger, heartbreak, disbelief, and a fierce protectiveness. I didn't ask her why she came to me. I didn't need to. A child, no matter how grown, always returns home when the world has shattered around them. And I would always, always be her safe place. When her tears finally slowed, she spoke again, this time with a hollow sort of exhaustion. She told me how they'd been saving for a house, working extra hours, putting every spare rupee into their shared account. She had trusted him so completely that she never imagined he would betray her in this way. She kept asking what she had done wrong, what signs she had missed. I listened to every word, but inside, anger burned hotter. This wasn't her fault. It was his cowardice, his selfishness, his cruelty. I told her to stay here as long as she needed. My home was hers, it always had been. She nodded, but her eyes still held devastation, like she was floating in the wreckage of her life and couldn't find her footing. I made her some warm tea and sat beside her, letting the silence settle around us, not heavy, but steady. Comforting. Sometimes quiet is the only thing fragile hearts can bear. As she slowly drifted to sleep on the couch, curled beneath the blanket, I watched her and felt an ache so deep it brought tears to my own eyes. A mother never stops protecting her child. Even when that child is grown, even when the world wounds them in ways you can't fix, you still want to gather all their pain and carry it for them. I knew the road ahead would be long for her. She'd have to rebuild from nothing, emotionally, financially, mentally. She'd have to confront the scars of betrayal and learn to trust again, someday. But she wouldn't walk that road alone. Not while I was alive to walk beside her. In that quiet living room, at nearly 3 in the morning, with my daughter asleep after hours of heartbreak, I promised myself that I would help her through every step of what came next. She had lost her savings, her security, her partner. But she hadn't lost me. And sometimes, a mother's love is the anchor that keeps you from sinking completely. The night was cold, but I wrapped another blanket around her and whispered gently that she was safe now. No matter how dark things had become, she had come home, and I would make sure she found her way to the light again. The morning after my daughter arrived at my house, the sun rose slowly, casting a soft light across the living room where she slept curled under a blanket. Her face was swollen from crying, her breathing uneven, as though even sleep could not fully separate her from the pain she had endured. I sat quietly at the dining table, a cup of tea cooling beside me, and tried to piece together how everything had fallen apart so quickly. The betrayal she had described felt almost unreal, like something ripped from a cruel drama rather than the life of my gentle, trusting daughter. But reality often hits harder than fiction. When she finally stirred awake, there was confusion in her eyes, as though for a moment she had forgotten where she was. Then it all came back to her. The empty bank account, the missing suitcase, the message from her friend, the image of her husband walking through the airport with another woman. Her shoulders slumped, and she covered her face with her hands. I didn't rush to her. I waited for her to breathe, to settle, to gather the broken pieces of herself enough to sit upright. When she finally did, she looked at me with eyes that no longer held shock, but something worse, an exhausted, hollow acceptance. She asked me if I thought she had been naive, if she had misjudged the man she trusted so completely. I told her the truth, that people who betray often wear masks so carefully crafted that even the wisest among us can be fooled. Love doesn't make someone weak, it makes them open, trusting. The shame belongs to the one who abuses that trust, not the one who gives it. Still, I could see she didn't fully believe me. Pain has a way of clouding the truth. She told me more about the past few months, small arguments, strange excuses, late nights he had brushed aside with claims of extra work. At the time, she had believed him. They had been saving for a home, planning for a future, talking about starting a family. She had imagined her biggest worry would be choosing the right neighborhood or finding furniture that matched. Instead, the man she hoped to build a life with had been building an escape behind her back. The more she spoke, the more I felt anger simmering beneath my ribs, a deep, protective anger only a mother could feel. How could he take every cent they had saved? How could he leave her not only heartbroken, but financially stranded? And worse, how could he walk away with another woman without a shred of guilt? I wanted to confront him, to demand an explanation, but I knew that was not my battle to fight. This was her storm, and I could only be her shelter. After she finished talking, the room fell quiet. She stared at her empty hands as though they once held something precious that now was gone. I stood, went to her, and sat beside her. I didn't try to offer clichés or meaningless reassurances. Instead, I told her something I meant with every fiber of my being, that she was not alone, and no amount of his cruelty could diminish her worth. She asked me what she should do next. It was a question tangled with fear and uncertainty. I told her the first step was to breathe and rest. Decisions made in panic seldom lead anywhere good. I reminded her she had a safe place here, that she didn't need to rush anything. Once she was ready, we would talk to the bank, inform the police, gather whatever information we could. She needed to protect herself legally and financially. But at that moment, she needed space to grieve the life she thought she had. Later that afternoon, she received a message from an unknown number. Her hands shook as she opened it. The message was from the woman her husband had left with, a cold, unapologetic line stating that he had chosen a better life, and that my daughter should move on. I watched the color drain from her face. It was one thing to be betrayed, but another to be mocked by the person he had run away with. My daughter didn't cry this time. She simply set the phone down and stared at the wall, silent and still. Sometimes silence is louder than tears, and her silence tore at me. I moved the phone away from her and told her no one had the right to speak to her that way. Not the woman, not the man who had abandoned her. No one, but her spirit looked so fragile, as if one more harsh word might shatter it completely. As evening approached, I cooked her favorite meal, though she barely ate more than a few bites. We sat together on the couch, the room lit only by a small lamp. She leaned her head on my shoulder the way she used to when she was a child, when I was the one who chased away her nightmares. It struck me then how life had circled back, different circumstances, deeper wounds, but the same instinctive need for a mother's comfort. I promised her again that we would get through this, step by step. That even if her world had collapsed, it could be rebuilt. Not in a day, or even a week, but in time. And when it was rebuilt, it would be stronger, safer, and filled with people who actually deserved to be in it. As she slowly drifted off to sleep again, I looked at her and felt a surge of determination. Her husband had stolen her money, her trust, her peace, but he would not steal her future. I would make sure of it. Whatever battles lay ahead, we would face them together. And together, we would uncover every truth buried under his deception, no matter how painful. Because healing begins the moment the lies are brought into the light.